Today we're going to talk about a spiritual therapeutic interpretation. I'm emphasizing a because I'm not saying it's the. You're allowed to have yours, right? All of us are allowed to interpret this stuff the way we want. I have a very specific interpretation of the meaning of Christmas because I'm a therapist and I work with people about, helping make their lives feel better. And I've seen over the years, doing this work for 20 some years, about the very, very healthy, helpful benefits of spiritual development. And Christmas weaves in beautifully with that. Now, I don't want anyone to change their opinion about Christmas. I've done about 5 Christmas videos over the years talking about different types of, like what the Virgin Mary means and the North Star and the wise men and all of that. They all have different symbolic references for sure, okay? But if you hold on to whatever you think Christmas means to you, I don't want that to change. I'm saying A, because this is mine, that has a spiritual and therapeutic flair to it in particular. That's going to be a little different, backed by some really, really awesome brain science, neurochemistry, and philosophy coming from Kabbalah, which is quite deep philosophy I like. And I'm linking just 2 things together to give you a different perspective on what maybe Christmas is about. Because most people think Christmas, what's it about? It's the birth of baby Jesus, and that's what we're celebrating. Fine. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Don't change that perception. Okay? And then you talk about, well, it's the true meaning of Christmas. Well, it's not commercialism, it's not buying gifts, it's, empathy, goodwill towards men and all of that. Yeah, that's also true, no doubt about it. But I'm going to layer it, okay? Just a different concept using science, which again is pretty easy to understand, the science, really deep science. That's amazing that most people haven't heard of, and a philosophical concept that you'll relate to, because it's like some philosophy works whenever you can relate to it and go, yeah, identify with that. And you'll see where the meaning of Christmas for me comes in that way. So we'll start with a concept I've talked about several times before. I have a video too online about it, but you can Google it and watch it yourself. 60 Minutes has done a couple series or a couple episodes on fMRI, which is a functional MRI. And it studies the brain to see how the brain works. And it looks at the brain very detailed, and it produces what they call, among other things, brain signatures. Now, in a way, a brain signature is just like me being able to tell where your left pinky is. If you have a left pinky, I can look at your hand and go, it's there, it's there, it's there. Well, the thing about the signature, they can identify where it's in your brain. It's like, there's your left pinky. The thing is, our left pinkies are in the same spot in our hands, aren't they? Right? I could identify where it's at. Well, what they found is thoughts and ideas and concepts are in the same spot in our brains, such that these are specific words they talk about. The idea of a hammer. If I mention a hammer to you and you know what a hammer is, right now the same neurons in your brain, the same signature or neural set in your brain just lit up. And if we're all thinking of a hammer, a computer can scan your brain and it can tell you're thinking of a hammer. It's the same as saying, oh, I know where your left pinky is. That's not impressive, but who knew that about brains? It's amazing. Screwdriver, same thing. If you're a carpenter and you know these tools quite well, those are pretty strong imprints in your brain. But if you're a baby, you've never heard of these words, and they scan your brain, it's not going to light up. You teach a baby what a screwdriver is. Next thing you know, you scan their brain several years later, and now it lights up. So you say screwdriver to those people, that spot lights up. To this person who doesn't know it wouldn't light up. Okay? And that's everything that they found over about 10 or 15 years now of studying the brain. They do it with places. You could have your living room and my head. My living room and your head. The other way works too. If I've been to your living room and they scan my brain, they can tell I've been there because my brain would have a space in it, a neural set in it for that's where, Tammy's living room is, for example, okay? And if you've been in mine, same thing. And so functions like addition and subtraction, they can tell if I give you 2 numbers, 10 and 6 or whatever, and you get to choose to add or subtract those numbers. The brain, the fMRI can tell if you're trying to add or subtract. Because if you're trying to add, the same neural set in your brain will light up as in my brain. And that's how they're able to identify it, that it's in everyone's brain in the same spot. That's crazy. It gets even deeper. Concepts, emotional states, things like love and kindness, hypocrisy and gossiping. They'll have subjects gossip or being hypocrites about something, and that part of their brain lights up, and they can tell they're being a hypocrite. Wouldn't that be nice to use with politicians? Okay. They can tell if you're trying to be kind. This is an emotional resonance. When we have this in common, that part of your brain will light up, and it'll light up in mine, and we feel the same. We might feel different about the results of a sporting event, but kindness to you is kind, and kindness to me, it's going to feel the same because it's the same area of the brain. And certain chemicals get released when you click on these things. Quite literally, endorphins, which is my favorite neuroscientific word, endorphins, which is your body's natural opioid, gets released when you have feelings of love and kindness and gratitude and hope and things like that. It's a very spiritual chemical as a result. In fact, all of these things release chemicals one way or another. These little dots I have on here called neurons, and there's 100 billion of them in your head, and they're packed with drugs. We just call them neurotransmitters. And whenever you tickle them, so to speak, with thoughts, resonance inside your brain, wavelengths or whatever, they release some of these chemicals. So no, being a hypocrite doesn't feel so good. It doesn't release the good, happy juice inside your head. But feeling love or loved or feeling kind or acting kind, those things do feel good. And I only drew a couple, okay? You'll see, I'll mention a few more later on. And then, the one that I always tell people to go Google if you don't believe me, Jennifer Aniston is a neuron in your head, okay? They literally call it the Jennifer Aniston neuron, because when they did this scientific study, they asked people if they knew who she was. And sure enough, there was a neuron in their head for just Jennifer Aniston. And people who didn't know Jennifer Aniston didn't have that neuron. Check that out. Also, Kobe Bryant, Bill Clinton, Halle Berry, they did those 4 people. This is around 2008. So when they did this kind of study. And so that's amazing. By the way, if you know me, now I'm a neuron in your head. And since I know you, you're a neuron in my head. And the debate is, was it there before we met? That's amazing. What if when you were born, I was already a neuron in your head? Whoa. We know that's how language works. Addition and subtraction, that's how this stuff works. They're functions that are in your head when you're born. Reflexes are already in your head like that. That's why they happen reflexively. They're automatic. So here you have, this is just a small little bit to talk about this for hours. This is naturally occurring in your head. Everyone has this. It's in the same spot. Isn't that amazing? So keep that in mind as we go over here to this teaching of the 5 stages of development for all of us. All beings on earth, like we just mentioned before we turned on the video, all beings on earth, the Buddha says, we will suffer. Dukkha, we will suffer. That's one of the first noble truths. And we're going to suffer because these stages are difficult, right? They're difficult to work through. But they're basic stages that we all go through in order. And everyone, you'll identify. Every time I've told anyone about this, they're like, yeah, that does make sense, right? And it'll make sense to you. First stage of your development as a physical being is your basic needs. If you don't have a sandwich and you're hungry, you're going to want to go looking for a sandwich, right? If you haven't had a sandwich for a while, you're going to be sitting around reading a book on the Buddha or Jesus or something. No, you're like, I need a sandwich, right? Your basic needs. What do you need? You need your physical needs met so that you feel safety, so that you have shelter, so that you eat, you drink, have some oxygen, stuff like that. Now, would you all agree? Everyone out there watching? Yeah, we all agree. Of course. Now, getting your basic needs met for one day is not sufficient. You're not satisfied with having a cheeseburger just today. I also want to know that I'm going to have one tomorrow. I'd like to know I'm going to have one for the next couple months too. Ideally, the rest of my life without fear. That would be great. Call that wealth. I don't want just one cheeseburger. I want an infinite supply so I don't have to worry about that phase anymore. Okay? I want a whole lot of it. We call that abundance. And that turns into what we experience as money, physical money. I want lots of wealth. I don't want just my physical needs met. I want so much of it, I don't have to worry about it ever again. But that makes sense, right? We all want that. That's a basic desire we have. We all crave that. We just want more. It's very evolutionary, If beings only looked for that one day's food, they would have never stocked up over the winter. They all died out and they didn't pass their genes on to the next generation. So this is how we formed evolutionary too. Well, once you have lots of cheeseburgers, that guy over there doesn't, what do you want to do? You want to protect your cheeseburgers, okay? You want some power so you can have some security. I want to make sure I have enough stuff. I need to know what to do to keep you from stealing my cheeseburgers. And this is, again, everybody, whether you lock your door or have some sort of weapon or laws that we set up to keep people from stealing each other's stuff. This is all of us, without exception. Now, we come and go with these phases for many reasons. I work with a lot of addiction. I know a lot of people who've been homeless, and when they show up, I don't start talking. Hey, let's talk about the real meaning of Christmas. We want to get them a sandwich first and then some shelter, okay? And so people are in different phases for sure. But we are always in these phases, and if you're lucky enough to get to this phase where you don't have to worry about these, good, you can move on to step 4. Step 4 is now knowledge and intellect, or I like to say explore. Now that you've got your basic needs met, go have fun with the world, because you have this thing called a mind. And your mind can do things like, wait, maybe if I put different spices on that cheeseburger, it'll taste different. Do I want it medium or medium well? See, that's something your mind will do in the world. It'll also learn different languages, maybe learn some math or calculus or whatever, maybe some poetry. Well, you can do that. You don't have to, though. But you can explore. Go looking throughout the world, studying stuff, Figure out, like, how are these stars moving? Are we on a flat surface or we're on a round ball, And you can figure that. You don't have to, though. But explore. You have the option to look at whatever the heck you want to look at. Free will. Whatever you want to study, study. And it's not like the universe cares if you're looking at Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or whatever. It says just go looking. Free will. Fear no evil, it says in Scripture, right? You don't have to worry if you look at the wrong thing for a while. If you look at the wrong thing for a while and you go in the wrong direction, let's just say you start using heroin because you thought that was a good idea. What happens after a while? The universe corrects you. Lovingly, it does. Every addict I've worked with that gets deep into recovery says, thank God for withdrawal, because it turned them around. In fact, your emotional states, all your emotional states when we're in this phase, tell you, look in a different direction if you're suffering, right? That's why the Buddha teaches in the Noble Truths, we suffer, but we don't have to suffer. We suffer because we're clinging to things. We're suffering because we're attached. You want to stop suffering? Change the events of the world. No, that won't work. Change your perception. Detach, he teaches, and now you won't suffer anymore. Learn the right view. Learn the true way this world is designed, right? Learn what's actually going on here. Can't fool Mother Nature, right? The world is set up in such a way that everyone goes through this path, and if you are lucky enough to get to this place where you can play around with your intellect, go for it. Guess what's going to happen eventually? Eventually, dukkha shows up because you're still not satisfied. A couple months ago, I talked about how Einstein said, science can only tell you about the nature of the world, but it can't tell you about the meaning of it. He says that has to come from another source. You have to figure out how to fill it with meaning. There's a Buddhist teaching along those lines too that says we're here to experience life and all its sufferings, but fill it with new meaning. Which means tell yourself a different story. Now we're getting close to Christmas, okay? Because if you're experiencing the physical world, you're gonna suffer, says the Buddha. These things are just to get to a point where you can play around with the intellect, okay? If you don't have these things, you're gonna suffer too. You'll be worried, you'll be in fear, you'll be starving, any number of things that's gonna cause suffering. You get to this phase, now we got the place where people can argue about stuff. My perspective is better than yours. My opinion's better than yours. My football team's better than yours, or vice versa. That doesn't get the job done, though, because we're not satisfied. Does anybody like that stuff? Who likes arguing about politics? I don't. Some people do. They won't for the long haul, I assure you that. Eventually, dukkha shows up. The other definition of dukkha, which is suffering, the other definition is unsatisfying. You eat a cheeseburger, you want another cheeseburger the next day, okay? That cheeseburger will only satisfy you for a little bit. Sex has a similar quality too. Might feel good then, but you're gonna want it again later. Money will never satisfy you fully, it might for a moment. And so we pursue all these desires that actually don't feel that good long term if all you do is seek them, because you're constantly seeking them, right? Seeking you find, says Jesus, but he wasn't talking about cheeseburgers or money either. Though there's nothing wrong with that, it's just not going to satisfy you. And if you understand that, now you know dukkha. Because it is unsatisfying, and no intellectual pursuit is going to satisfy you either. That would be equivalent to saying the smartest people on earth should always feel good. In fact, very high suicide rate in this country is at Ivy League schools. Very smart people struggling with things like meaning, right? And so intellect only goes so far. Now here's where I like to say, does the acorn know it's becoming an oak tree? Does it have an awareness that it's becoming an oak tree? Probably not. Maybe, but not likely. But it does become an oak tree through a process of certain nurturing, the right nutrients or in the right soil and water and sunlight and all that. And the next thing you know, it becomes like an oak tree. Well, this phase happens to almost all of us without us knowing it at all. We sort of have to look back upon it and go, wait, that is what happened to me. Because we don't know what's happening to us. What's happening to us is we're all being developed or turned into a Christ. Right? We all have a Christ seed inside of us. It's the splinter in your mind that's driving us mad, says Morpheus in the Matrix. All of us are only going to be satisfied by one thing, says Kabbalah. And they say a connection to God or the Creator. That's the thing that shows up fifth and last. Because you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I've done all this. I got plenty of that stuff. I'm trying to fix the world and the world's not cooperating. I wish I could solve human suffering or human starvation. Good luck, keep trying it, no problem, you're allowed to do that. Fortunately, spirituality takes care of all of it, one way or another. And it gets rid of suffering. Because there is one thing inside of you that will always satisfy you, okay? Dukkha goes away because you're like, okay, now that works. The heroin didn't work. The arguing about politics didn't work. The trying to root for my team to win a Super Bowl every year didn't work. None of that stuff worked. The one thing that will work, though, is spirituality. And this is Christmas. Because this is what I wrote here. The baby is born, the birth of the desire inside of you to come to know Christ. Like for real, though. Not the way it got taught. Not the Santa Claus Jesus. The one who said amazingly deep things like you have to love your enemies and you have to forgive everyone. How many people claim to be Christian and don't do that? But to love each other as yourself, man, that's big. But I'm about to show you what that means, again, neurochemically. To love each other as yourself, that's what Jesus said his commandments were. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love another as oneself. First of all, lots of endorphins right there. Lots of love going on. All your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's lots of love. Not just 2/3 of the time or just when the Steelers win or the Browns. Not just because your guy or gal wins the presidency. That's not when you're supposed to love. You're supposed to love all the time. You can stick with your intellect all you want about, how to medium well or who you want to see be the president. But true spirituality is when you have that desire. It's the birth of a desire for you to know the real answers. Okay? What I call capital T truth. Now, in that phase is where we have to talk about what Christ actually means. Now, I had this up there a month or two ago. Wow, we're talking about some other group, but what the word Christ means. Christ is a derivative of the word Christos, which in Greek means anointed. Now, when you look at the world physically, which is this phase, you think that means if I take some oil or some water or whatever and I put it on a baby's head and I say, you're now anointed with Holy Spirit because I put some water on your head, you get to go to heaven. I mean, even Apostle Paul mocks that in the Bible. That type of baptism is just a metaphor. Again, nothing wrong with it. I don't want anyone to change their opinions on that. That is there for a reason. It's okay, for sure. But the true anointing is anointing Christos. And Christos, the anointing happens inside oneself. Jesus' last name wasn't Christ. It wasn't his nickname. His middle initial's not H. It is Yeshua bar Joseph, and he became Jesus Christ because he was Christos. He was anointed with what? This drawing, okay? Now, Galatians 5:22, one of my faves. Galatians, the fruits of the Spirit. You know them? Many of you know the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the fruits of the Spirit. I didn't see anything about basketball, a dunking ability, or race or gender or anything like that, physical. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Well, two of those they already talked about in the fMRI study. They're brain signatures in your head, and they're located in the same space as your head as they are in my head. Right? What a pretty cool world we're living in. You have access to love and kindness, so do I. You also have access to hypocrisy and gossip. Who gets to choose which one you go finding? Can someone stick something inside your head to make that happen? They could try. That's what drugs do. They don't do it very well, though. No surgery is going to do it. The rest of this line, Galatians 5:23 says, against such things there is no law. Who can keep you from working on this stuff? I mean, it's in your head, right? And it doesn't talk about who the right person to elect is or which religion is the right religion. None of this talks about what we're supposed to be doing behaviorally, right? This is why Jesus says, yeah, you get to go to heaven as long as you believe, okay? Pretty low standard, except for it's a really high standard because you have to get past your ego. You have to actually work your way through all of this, including your intellect, because that's the biggest one. People think they understand all this stuff, and guess what? No, you really don't. The only thing you only understand your relative experience of this world. Where were you planted, right? And if you were planted in Syria, you're going to have that perspective. You're planted in Indiana, you're going to have that perspective, right? And depending on what your mommy and daddy told you, you're going to take on some of that. And your first grade teacher, and your friends, and all your experiences, and the traumas, and all of that, who's capable of understanding all of that and say, oh, this is the way it needs to be? Not in the physical. There isn't a physical way to do it. But that's why, you notice my red and green colors, very Christmassy. That's why we kick it over into spirituality, because that's the game changer. The moment you have the birth of the desire of Christos inside yourself, that's Merry Christmas. So if I put those patterns, love, joy, peace, and all this from Galatians in the head, here I have quite literally patterns, the brain signatures, and I started to formulate this one, put it together. What if this connects to that, which connects to that, connect the dots? Now we know if you're thinking of a screwdriver or my living room, or drinking a screwdriver in my living room, for example. There's a lot of different ways to spin that. That would be a brain pattern in your head. Well, I'm drawing very rudely or roughly what the Christos pattern might look like in your head. And if these are the fruits of the Spirit, and they're all brain signatures inside your head, wouldn't it behoove us to say, well, maybe, just maybe, that's where we find Christ? Where did he say the kingdom of heaven is found? Inside of us. Not up. Again, that's ultra-dimensional or extra-dimensional. The fruits of the Spirit are found inside of you. That's why the kingdom of heaven is inside of you. My joke is I wish he had said the word endorphins right there. We would have a major leg up on defeating the opioid epidemic. But it's inside of you. So remember, Jesus did not come to live the law of religion. He came to fulfill the law. And he fulfilled the law by nailing all those fruits of the Spirit. Because he was kind and compassionate and forgiving and non-judgmental. And he knew that the only way to get out of this place and stop suffering is to have this experience. He didn't just know it, he was it. That's why he's Jesus Christ. Now, it doesn't take much at all to see that the Buddha taught the exact same stuff. Okay, 500 years before, he didn't have the benefit of reading the Bible. Okay? And yet he taught the same stuff. It's the Eightfold Path, and everything that he taught was the same thing. Basically, let go of your ego, practice kindness, compassion, all that kind of stuff. He didn't know about the science of it, but it's all right there because he could do it too. You might as well call him Siddhartha Christ. That would be fine, although it would be offensive to people that think that it's some sort of dogma. The truth is, Jesus was like, well, no, first of all, you're forgiven, fear no evil, love everybody no matter what. Forgive us seven times 70, that type of stuff. Very, 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 very virtues focused, wasn't he? Read the Bible. A lot of people say they have. I don't know if they have. He doesn't really talk about behaviors much at all. And so, Christos is a brain signature inside of your head. And if you haven't reached that phase, because it's not hard to see, you got 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, they haven't reached puberty yet. You can tell that pretty simply. A lot of human beings just are still stuck, and a lot of them are still working on this stuff. Totally fine. All of us go through that. And a lot of people are still stuck in their ego. They're still stuck in their intellect. And they're convinced that this is the way the world actually is. And meanwhile, our buddy Einstein says, no, the whole world's an illusion. Time doesn't even exist. The ego will obsess over age and hairline and flat abs and stuff like that, right? But the Spirit knows something altogether different. There isn't even any time. You don't have any age. Your soul, whatever that is not getting any older, okay? Your ego is and your body is, and it falls apart, and then it's dead and all of that. And what have you done while you're here? Did you just work on these 4 phases, or did you work on that one? And there's the key. There's the map right there. Those virtues in particular are in your head. We already described that. And if you check off all those boxes and you click all of them, a pattern would form. I think they're going to find that soon, by the way. If they don't, AI will. I'm sure of this. Probably within 5 years, AI is going to go, why don't you look at remember, AI is artificial intelligence. It's not going to be emotional. So it's not going to get all bent out of shape about things. You can disagree with it. It'll just say, incorrect. Or like the Buddha, that does not further. That's what it'll say. It'll say, you human beings all have formulations inside your head. You could call them brain signatures, and each one of them has different features. There's something difference between patience and forgiveness and courage, but they're all virtues. They're in your head. Connect them, and as they come together and form a larger picture, like a puzzle, it's what you call Christ, and it's inside of you. And if that lights, an idea inside your head, and if it feels different, then again, totally celebrate the birth of Jesus. Totally. I have a manger at my house. We do that. That's totally fine. I'm totally cool with that whole story. But what if it means something a little different? Because the man himself grew up to say, you have to pick up your cross and carry it, okay? You have to do what I do. And you don't have to go die on a cross. That would be physical again. But you do have to love your enemy, right? You do have to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You're going to have to be forgiving, kind, compassionate, wise, and all those things. It's helpful to have a sense of humor. That helps too. But all those things formulate a pattern inside your head. And if that's just you're feeling that for the first time, Merry Christmas. That's the birth of the baby, so to speak, of your little Christ inside of you. You know what born again means? He says it right there in the Bible. You're born once of flesh, born once from a woman, and the second time you're born of the Spirit. That's what it is. And so the Spirit comes out in you right there. And all that, everything, if you're hitting all those right buttons, then how do you think you feel? It's very Zen-like, okay? It's the kingdom of heaven inside you. Fear goes way down. Trust, love, respect, all that goes way up. And if you're really good at it, they could nail you to a cross and you'd be okay with it. Hard work, but there we're at. So the real meaning of Christmas from the therapeutic perspective, because everyone that walks this journey says the same thing. I do feel better. I don't have any resentments anymore, I feel connected to something else. I'm not even afraid of death anymore, That's what people do. We all have that in common. Our little pinkies are in the same spot. Jennifer Aniston's in each of our brains. So's Christos, okay? So the therapeutic, spiritual interpretation of the true meaning of Christmas is the birth of the Christ inside of you.